Right, I am delighted to have on my show today Sonita Gale of Gale Force Films. You have just come back from Glastonbury, where you were screening your film Hostile. How did that go?
Oh, thank you, Nick. Thank you so much for having me on Summer Valley FM. I'm really happy to be here. Glastonbury was an amazing experience. I think having been to Glastonbury for many years and not been to Glastonbury since 2019, to be back at Glastonbury post-COVID with a film that I directed and I debuted during the pandemic was just an absolute honour. It was to a mixed audience of Glastonbury goers, of individuals that love art, film, music, and a mixed demographic, actually, young and old, black, brown and white. And it was incredible to be there. And I think that it was just, it was a moment where I just sat there and thought, I'm playing at Glastonbury. And I loved it.
Amazing. And how did it go down? How did you feel that mixed audience respond?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there was a lot of sort of anger in the audience, a lot of disbelief, a lot of upset, a feeling of action, call for action, what can we do to overcome these hostile policies? I think what was special about this particular screening was that it was hosted by film critic Mark Kermode, and also it was the panel, we were joined by John Savan, who is the ex-director of Greenpeace. So I think to have, Mark and John be part of this also just gave that authenticity to the panel and also insight not only into film and that process, but also into the global issues around the hostile environment. So the audience not only got to see the film, but they also got to enjoy a panel discussion afterwards. And there was a Q&A which involved some of the audience members also. So I think audiences left feeling like there was a call for action. And I think Hostile kind of demands that people go in there and they feel kind of helpless at the time, potentially watching it. And they also feel really upset. They feel angry. They kind of like question why they didn't know about this, especially some of the hostile environment policies. But I feel like when audiences leave, they feel like they want to do something. It's like, okay, we've learned about this now. We've watched this. What can we do in the world to change this language? And so I think, yeah, it was a very empowering screening. It was amazing.
Yeah, well, I watched the film myself last night with my partner, who was in tears a number of times during the film. I was slamming my fist down on the sofa in anger. And, it's an embarrassment on our country to have these policies and to not really be aware. Well, I think, we hear sort of little bits in the news about the policies and refugee problems. But to see those personal stories, it's just shocking how we've treated these people. For anyone that doesn't know much about the film, it's called Hostile. Sonita, why don't you just tell us roughly what it's about? Because we haven't touched on that yet.
Yeah, so Hostile is a film about the hostile environment in the UK. So the hostile environment is really a set of policies, it's a web of policies put in place by successive governments, not just the Conservative or Labour or Liberal, all governments over decades have built this hostile environment narrative which permeates and bleeds into policy and legislation. And those policies are really put there to restrict the rights of migrants that are here or migrants that are coming here. So an example of the hostile environment is a policy called no recourse to public funds. And no recourse to public funds is attached to particular visas that people that are here on limited leave to remain. So they're working here legally, lawfully, but when a global pandemic hits, they can't access things like universal credit, disability allowance, child support allowance, some of the healthcare system facilities that we have, they can't access the healthcare system. So GP services, it just goes on and on. So the hostile environment is really put in place to kind of limit people's rights in a way, but also if they're trying to live here and have their lives here long term, they also struggle, because if you're here on a limited leave to remain, you get caught in a system, you get caught in a trap. So every 2.5 years, you have to pay $2,500 per person to renew that visa, but also try to get indefinite leave to remain, which takes you out of that loop. So they have something called the 10-year track. And at the end of that 10-year track, you're really bloody hoping that you're going to get your indefinite leave to remain. Some people don't get it. So they've just spent 10 years paying tens of thousands of pounds to stay in this country, only to be told that they can't stay here any longer. And then you see, you had that in the case of Farouk Said, that's kind of living here and working here currently. And then you have issues around the hostile environment that affect students, international students particularly, and those who are affected by the Windrush scandal, those that came here post-empire, you know, in the 50s, where they felt they came here legally, lawfully, only to be told 5 decades later that you don't have any paperwork, there is no trace of you, you are, you know, identityless in a way. It's
insane. It's like a Kafka kind of surreal. How can you live here for 50 years and contribute so much to our society? And then that society just turns around and says, go away. Not even go home, because it's not their home. You know what I mean? They've lived here for 50 years, but they're saying, oh, go home. It's shocking. Look, I'm going to take a break now, play a piece of music, and then we come back. I want to ask about, you know, some of the making of the film and how you found the contributors. And when you made it, because I think, like you said, when you made it was very important. Okay, let's listen to this. I don't know what I'll play. Have you thought of your track? But you have to think of your track, by the way. Have you got?
Oh, do I? I'm going to think of my track. Oh.
Did you get my email? I sent you an email saying.
I'll think of a track that's kind of hopeful. I mean, let's think of a track that speaks about the hostile environment, or speaks about communities and building communities. I mean, let me think about that. I mean, Dave, Stormzy, I'll think about a track, Riz Ahmed, you know, he's that.
As long as there's no swearing, I can honestly play. I can play anything, so that's
okay. Oh, do you know what? I think you need to play You Are. You Are features in my film. It's by Nitin Sawhney, my exec producer. Yes. And that's at the end of the film. And it's about, you know, you are the planet, we are together, collectiveness, we are in this together. So it's like, I think that's a really beautiful track to play. And it's on his latest album.
Yeah. Well, that I'll ask you to sort of introduce that later. I have to say, I did really love the music. Okay, let's carry on. Right, Sonita, I loved the film. I thought the photography was beautiful. I thought the music was beautiful, obviously done by Nitin Sawhney, who's also a co-producer with you. Beautiful music in it. And I think some of the moments when you just film some of the participants just at home doing simple things with this lovely undertone of music, it really creates a fantastic mood. And I know you filmed it during lockdown. How did you find the contributors? And you know, what was the process in kind of pre-production to try and get this made?
Yeah, I mean, it was making a film during normal circumstances as a debut director is tough. Making one during a global pandemic is impossible, you know. And I guess I took on that at that time in March 2020. I think for me, it was about identifying those communities where they were responding to the global pandemic. So my initial film that I was going to make was how migrant communities during a global pandemic were keeping our society moving. A bit like how my parents were when they came to the UK. They came here as, they were factory workers, they ran a convenience store. So I was really looking for them. You know, I wanted to go out and film them and film those communities. So that was my sort of first thought about the film I was making. And then I found Daksha Vasani. She was in the Kilburn Times, and I read the newspaper, and I saw this response kitchen that was responding to the pandemic and feeding thousands of people a week, you know, all sorts of people, from NHS workers to people that had jobs that had lost jobs, to single parents, to migrant communities, to white, black and brown, not just in Brent, but across London. So I wanted to go and meet her. So I read this article and I thought how heroic Daksha and Paresh were to take this on themselves. And I found her in the paper. And I think that meeting Daksha then opened my mind up to this wider issue of the hostile environment. She was the one that exposed me to no recourse to public funds, because a lot of the people that she was helping had no recourse to public funds. And when I learned about that, and then she told me about the students, I wanted to learn more. So she led me really to Ilias in East London. So I went from North London to East London. And then the story of the students kind of opened my mind up to, well, hey, is there a student that was here 10, 15 years ago that's now suffering from the hostile environment? And then I found Farouk in the Independent. May Bullman had broken his story. And when I learned about Farouk, I was like, this hasn't just happened right now, this hostile environment. And it hadn't just happened in 2012. And that's when I kind of learned about the Windrush scandal and the seat of the hostility in our country that goes back decades. And so I then watched at the same time in June 2020, Sitting in Limbo, which was a drama about Anthony Bryan's story. And as I learned about that drama, I wanted to reach out to Anthony. And so I found Anthony through contacts I had actually. And then he exposed me to the wider story around the hostile environment. So it was really each kind of participant led me to the next, and kind of just keeping my mind open to the narrative and the story, and just to my conviction. I knew at that point during filming, I could not stop filming about this legislation and policy and law, and I needed to learn more. It became like an exploratory kind of research kind of expedition. I was like filming, and I was learning, and I was teaching myself history, and it was all happening at the same time, and it was all through my participants, and I'm so grateful to them, because without them I wouldn't have learnt about this. And so this film is really their film, because without them there would be no film. So I'm so much gratitude.
And where do you think this hostile attitude comes from? What is the root?
I think it's twofold. I think it's the appetite of the voters at that time. What do people want? How do I win votes? Oh, let's just work on divide and rule. Let's set populations against each other. Right now, we're going to use the Brexit campaign. Let's just target the white working class against the migrant communities, as Brad Evans talks about in the film, the globally precarious against the vulnerable, you know, the white working class vulnerable. And I think a lot of that narrative comes across by setting populations against each other and winning votes. In a way, in a basic way, you look at that and you think, wow, is this all about vote winning? Well, yes, it is. It's about keeping them in party, keeping them in government and winning votes. So I think from a government point of view, a lot of it's to do with that. What's the flavor at the time, you know, how are we going to get those votes? And I think a lot of it was to do with that, and a lot of it's to do with monetary. I mean, this hostile environment is a very lucrative business. The Home Office made 500 million in 2018. So for them, cash cowing migrants like Farouk is a business to them, and they want to keep cash cowing. You know, the Home Office sits outside the Treasury. It's an organization within itself, and it operates within itself. So I think for them, they have this ability to control how much those applications cost. So it's about every year, those applications are getting more and more expensive, and the processes attached to that are becoming more and more difficult. So it's a lot to do with winning votes, cash cowing, oppression. Yeah, you know, let's keep people oppressed, let's keep people where they are. People like Farouk who can't fill in their application because English isn't their first language, but you know, let's just keep on pushing these applications their way. So it's a lot about oppression as well, and control. And I think that hostility comes from the leaders, the people, the policymakers, those people that we look up to, and then that permeates throughout society. Yeah. And then when you turn populations against each other, you know, the vulnerable then start hating the globally precarious, and the globally precarious start hating the vulnerable, because actually, if you look at them both, they're both extremely similar in their identity, but because we're using this hostile environment, we're setting people against each other. So it's a tactic of divide and rule as well. And I think that a lot of that is covered in the film, and it's my conclusion where it comes from, absolutely at that point.
Sonita, let's bring this background to the sort of green global environmental kind of viewpoint. You know, as climate change affects areas of the planet, it's already causing fires and floods in many parts of the world. There is going to be migration. People are going to move. How do you think we're going to be able to tackle that? Because certainly in my view, we are just a species on a planet. We're very lucky to be here in this solar system, spinning around in this galaxy. As far as we know, there's no other species like us. Why do we fight with each other? Why do we battle with each other? And why do we not share our resources? That's, my fundamental question to every other human being. How do you think we can come together, as we face some of these climate challenges?
I think we need to come together if we're going to save the planet. I really do. I think that we're in a very dark time right now, and the time has and is running out. And I think that, what is happening with the migration crisis right now, where people are fleeing persecution, they're fleeing war, they're fleeing catastrophic climate crises like flooding, drought, these things are happening on a daily basis. And I think that what we feel like that can't happen to us, but in fact it is happening to us. We're having rising sea levels, we're having storms that we've never experienced before, endless rain that we've not experienced before, heat that we've not experienced before on our island. And so what we're seeing now in that change of weather pattern is something that's been happening globally across the world for so many years. And migration is happening not just because people want to come here for a better life. People are fleeing because their lives there are just they're not able to live in the countries that they're living in right now. They're not able to feed their children. They're not able to shelter themselves. They're living in very bad circumstances. Who would want to cross the water and risk their entire family if they didn't have to? My mom was a refugee in India during the time of India and Pakistan. She walked for 16 days with no food, no clothes. Like she says in my film, everything was gone. And why would she have done that being a 12-year-old child? And why would her parents have put her into that sort of situation if they didn't have to? So I know firsthand what migration is about. And I think that if we learn that people do it because they have to, we realize that one day we might have to. So I think there needs to be more empathy, there needs to be more understanding, there needs to be more support. And I think what's happening now with the migration crises is that, we're seeing it from countries where we are involved in those wars, where we are involved in those climate crises, where we are involved in all aspects of the hostility within that country, which then spurs on the migration that we have, which then spurs on the fact that we have these good refugees versus these bad refugees. The ones that come by boat are bad, the ones that come by plane are good. And then we have policies like the Rwanda plan, which come into place because of that. And so I think it's our actions that are causing a lot of this global migration crisis. So I think it goes
back hundreds of years. Sorry, but it does go back hundreds of years. Our whole colonial history was about taking over these countries and taking all as many resources. And these wars, we start these wars and then complain when the poor citizens want to leave those countries and come to us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the most heartbreaking sort of part of this whole film that I made, is that realization that we are so intrinsically responsible for what is happening. We are so responsible. And if we start looking at that and thinking, well, that responsibility lands on us, then maybe we will start being more empathetic to those that are coming here and more welcoming. And you think about migration has happened over hundreds of years. People have moved around the world for many reasons. So why now is there an issue? When only thousands of people are moving every year. We're not talking about millions, thousands of people are coming here, and we have the ability to take them. And so I think it's the whole narrative around migration needs to change. It needs to be more welcoming, needs to be more supportive. There needs to be more, acceptance for that. And how beautiful it is. I'm a second generation. I married a Caucasian man. My children are Indian. They are English. They have their heritage is mixed. So they have that wealth of knowledge from both cultures. And how beautiful is that? And like I said, a lot of the migrant communities that have come here, they've worked in factories, in the NHS, in textiles, you know, in business. And it's just, the list goes on and on. We are a melting pot, and we should be so proud of that. And I think right now, the way that we are heading, not only in the UK, but we're seeing it in Brazil, we're seeing it in Hungary, we're seeing it in Russia, we're seeing it in France, we're seeing it all over the world, where we're seeing these hostile communities and the uprising of the right. And I think it's come from that divide and rule, you know, let's just keep that narrative going, and then we'll keep the migrants out. You know, it's
Absolutely.
like the Brexit campaign was all about that. So I think we as the public just need to be aware that that is happening. And once we're aware of that, then we can actually stop it from happening, for sure.
We need to change, like you say, change that narrative, because we are responsible as an empire country. We are responsible for many of the wars and these problems, and we need to take ownership of that, rather than, like you say, blaming these poor refugees who are only trying to live, ultimately. Sonita, we could carry on talking for a long time, but we haven't got much time left. So before we wrap up, I know you've got a screening next week in Clevedon at the Curzon next Thursday, 7:30. Where can people get tickets? Because I would really advise people to go along. It may be an uncomfortable watch, but it's a necessary watch.
Yeah, sure, Nick. So the film is showing at the Curzon Cinema in Clevedon on Thursday, the 7th of July at 7:30, and you can get tickets hostiledocumentary.com. All of the screenings are there. We're still in cinemas. We're now entering our 6th month. So the film is still going strong, and please come along and see the film. Yeah,
it's had some great response, great reviews, great feedback. You don't need to take my word for it. So before we wrap up, what track have you chosen to play out with?
Okay, so Nitin Sawhney is an incredible musician, artist, and now a friend. He's my exec producer on Hostile. You Are is the song that sort of completes the journey of the film, really. It's on his album Immigrants, an album made in response to the demonization of immigrants. You Are is about finding strength in something greater and remaining strong. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming on the show today. Here is You Are by Nitin Sawhney.